Hi, everybody. I am Wendy Silvers, and this is my master series where I have the opportunity to dialogue with great people doing great things in the world. And I'm just so thrilled and honored and delighted to be bringing you Del Bigtree, award-winning, Emmy Award-winning producer for 6 years on the show The Doctors. Amazing man. He is the founder of ICANDecide.org, Informed Consent Action Network. He is a benevolent leader in the health freedom movement. He is a powerful, passionate, poignant speaker, articulate. He is somebody he also was a producer of the film Vaxxed. He has been integrally involved in bringing truth, transparency, accountability to the field of freedom, all freedoms, and specifically health freedoms, and specifically as it relates to mandatory vaccines and the information that is disseminated by pharmaceutical companies and big ag. And so I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Del in 2016 when Vaxxed 1 came out, and then subsequently getting to know him and his beautiful family, and having the opportunity to just watch him continue to become a global stand for freedom, which is remarkable, to support parental rights, to protect children, science-based inquiry, remarkable, reasonable requests from the pharmaceutical companies. And so I just invite you to help me welcome Del. Del, welcome.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I was just thinking right before we started this call how, you know, it's been many years now that you and I have known each other. 2016, 4 years ago. And by the way, those are some of the longest years, I think, of most of our lives. So it's sort of like we've known each other for like 20 years.
Yeah, right. It's definitely amplified. It's been, for anybody who's watching who has not, who doesn't understand the whole concept of sacred activism, which is what I like to call it, because when you become a parent or when there are children in your lives, there is an unspoken vow that is taken. It's almost like it's written on your heart that you will do everything and anything in your power and within your power to make sure that your children are safe and healthy and have opportunities to grow and thrive. And so the way that so many of us came into the health freedom movement was A, by people coming up to us and saying to us, have you heard, did you know, do you know? And then seeing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children who have been injured and killed by the ingredients in vaccines. And yet the message is what? What's the script? Safe and effective. So I invited Del because I think he is a man of such great honor and esteem, who has so much integrity. This is, when I see you, Del, I know that you are being moved by a power greater than yourself. I've seen you center yourself and really tune in. And when you start going, I know that there's a force moving through you. And I love the quote on the ICANDecide.org, which I invite everybody to also go donate, be a continuing donator. Please support all the work that he is doing. And I love this quote: "Our fathers fought against tyranny to realize the dream of a great and free nation. It is time for the free people of the greatest nation on earth to stand up for our freedom, to choose what's healthy for our own bodies before the industrial, agriculture, and pharmaceutical industries pass laws that force those decisions upon us."
Yeah.
So here we are. I know that I'm streaming to Facebook, which may or may not be taken down, because in addition to big ag and big pharma, we now have big tech. We have technocrats making decisions and whispering into the ear of the President of the United States as to what actions should or should not be taken. Can you please talk to that, speak to your experience with that, what you have discovered and uncovered during this pandemic?
Well, you know, there's a lot that's taken place just in the last few weeks. I mean, it's fascinating. You know, Vax changed my life. Working on that moved me out of my role in television, where, as you pointed out, I had a really great job on the CBS talk show, The Doctors. But I saw information and a truth that no one else was sharing. And it really wasn't that altruistic a thought. It was just, as a reporter, you mean no one else is telling this story and I can have this one all to myself? I mean, in some ways, that's what drives you, right? That's what starts that journey. But as I got deeper and deeper into it, it started revealing other truths about government, about industrial controls of regulatory agencies, about the media's, influence on the population and the influence upon media by its sponsors, which is primarily pharma and things that don't care about our health or the future of our planet. And so all of those things, I then began, I started the nonprofit Informed Consent Action Network, mostly because I couldn't answer all the questions. Vaxxed was a very specific journey into one study, really. I mean, if you've seen Vaxxed, it's really more of a government cover-up story than it is about vaccines and vaccine safety, even though that's what it's called Vaxxed. The heart of it is a vaccine study. But really, I think it's more like All the President's Men or some story about Watergate, where you really see government officials covering something up. In fact, one of the things that people will say to me, that are against me, they say, I saw, Vax doesn't prove that the MMR vaccine causes autism, which is, if you haven't seen the film, you have to see it, but that's the study, right? Does the MMR cause autism? It was the study done by the CDC between 2000 and 2004. But people say that film doesn't prove the MMR causes autism. And I say, you're right, it doesn't. What it proves, is that there were 5 scientists that believed they were seeing a causal relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism, and they committed scientific fraud to hide that from the people. That's what the film is about. It's about the proof of a fraud and the 10,000 documents provided by a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson that show how that fraud took place and what exactly was the manipulation of a study. So, but as we started traveling the country with Vaxxed, I kept getting questions I couldn't answer. Number one, we were interviewing more and more, hundreds of parents, and then thousands of parents and families stepping forward, telling about the injury to their child or the death of their child. And on our bus, that we're touring where they started signing their names, which became this driving memorial. But there was a couple of things that happened to me. One was this idea that, every single childhood vaccine that we know of, I have met a parent that said that killed my child or that destroyed my child's life. And then other people would come up after the film and say, your film is only about the MMR. What about all of the other vaccines? And so I couldn't answer that question. And as a journalist and someone that has spent 6 years celebrating science and medicine, trying to get the great answers and the great evolutions of technology and medicine and doctors. And by the way, I'm a fan of all of those things. But I couldn't answer that question. Is it only the MMR? And so that started the Informed Consent Action Network. I put a team of researchers together, a legal team, so that we could bring, civil actions and actions against government agencies. As you know, we've won lawsuits against the National Institute of Health, Health and Human Services, the FDA, and most recently the CDC. But through all of this journey, something was happening that I'd never seen before. Coming from television, I was able to cover most of the stories I wanted to, but they always aired and, your story was heard all of a sudden because I was telling a story that was showing a weakness inside of, the CDC, a problem with how things were being done. And the pharmaceutical industry, Vax just kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival. I think one will go down as one of the great censoring events in history. We weren't, there's one thing to not have, to have pharma sponsors that are, running your ads and your commercials, telling you what to do on the doctors, but to be in a free film festival, one of the top in the world, that celebrate dramatic stories and outrageous documentaries, whether they're true or not, but real people, you know, expressing their thoughts in front of cameras. And to think that a film festival would censor free speech, I didn't think they would do it, but it was surprising when they did. And of course, that was really the beginning of what we are now watching around these discussions about the pharmaceutical industry and 5G and things that could be affecting our lives. You know, Vax then really led the way in being, you know, censored on Amazon. We had, you know, Congressman Adam Schiff reach out to Jeff Bezos and say, you need to remove any book that questions the safety of vaccines or a connection between vaccines and autism. Every film the next day, you know, we had a deal with Amazon that it was free for all Amazon Prime members till the end of time, and that was stripped away. And then now I have my own internet talk show I do every week called The Highwire. It's 11 a.m. Pacific time on Thursdays.
The best show. It's the best. It's such a great show.
Thank you. Thank you. And it really has been a blast to, first of all, I brought over a couple of the producers that I worked with at CBS so that we could deliver the level of quality and investigations that I was doing on mainstream television, to now deliver that to a Facebook audience, a YouTube audience, and our internet audience at thehighwire.com has really been exciting. But again, censorship, right? Videos where I'm simply showing the head of the WHO in a propaganda piece by the WHO saying vaccines are safe. We have a very robust surveillance system, played with a video where 4 days later she's at a meeting with the WHO behind closed doors saying, we really don't have a very good surveillance system. We don't know what to tell parents when they say vaccines killed their child. We need more information. So two diametrically opposed positions. Because I put that on the internet, it says false information. I'm actually working on a lawsuit over that right now. We've got to stop this censorship of free speech on these platforms. This would be like your telephone being listened to. They maybe say that they're private companies, but these are communications apparatus that we all now use. They cannot be turning off your phone because you're saying something to a friend that they don't agree with. That, you know, smacks of very scary historical pasts like, you know, Nazi Germany and things like that. And I think that more and more people are really waking up to that now that we find ourselves in the middle of this coronavirus, as you call it, pandemic. I would challenge that statement a little bit. I think that if this was planned, there would have been a vaccine ready to go. I think there was a plan. I think they've rushed their plan because so many of us were awakening. We're growing exponentially, and which was why they had that meeting at the WHO last December, to figure out a way to stop the evolution and growth of humanity, saying pharma does not appear to be making us healthier. And that skepticism is running rampant through the world. I think this is the result. I do think there were plans in place, but something tells me when they say they have 12 to 18 months before they can get a vaccine, I think it gives you a mathematical equation to say they rushed their plan by about 12 to 18 months. And I think that's their weakness. And it's really all we could have hoped for. We can talk more about that if you're interested.
Me, I could listen to you speak for hours. I'm absolutely interested.
No.
I appreciate the way that you are able to provide salient information and facts, and in a way that people can handle. The Highwire is one of the greatest shows because it is journalism. When I went to college and I studied, my major was advertising communications. My minor was Studio 54, but that's another conversation. And my journalism teacher said, your job is to research everything. You are not to have your opinion in the piece that you are delivering. If you may have an opinion, but you're supposed to present both sides fairly and equally. And my experience since falling into this health freedom movement, and even before, is that there's only one side. And now with the expansion of the censorship, I interviewed Dr. Judy Mikovits, and it was, I had, at the time of removal, close to 10,000 views, and it was going every day. I still have people contacting me. I really want to see that interview, and no response about where and what community guidelines we violated.
Yeah.
So you're doing another lawsuit. For people, again, for people that don't know, I want you to go to icandecide.org, and there's a drop down where it says lawsuits. I want you to take 20 minutes out of your day, every day, and just look at the depth of work that Del and his team are doing. And I love that you and Bobby are collaborating and have collaborated, like on the CDC and the HHS and other lawsuits, because to be able to present to the American public that the truth is not being serviced. It's not being serviced, it's not being served. So yes, please talk more about censorship, about what can, if somebody's just tuning in, one of my people on my page are going, oh, who's this guy? You know, what are they talking about? Censorship. Can you please break it down for us, Del?
Well, the one thing I want to say, there's lots of great voices in this movement, and whatever a movement is, right? There are, you know, we all get labeled as anti-vaxxers. You know, I think Bobby Kennedy gets in trouble when he says, I am not anti-vaccine, you know, I'm pro-science. I make a statement very similar to that. And we were in a roundtable discussion on the truth about vaccines, which is another great production I was a part of recently. But I wanted to define, you know, for people, you know, that we all get attacked, right? Everyone could do this better, or everyone sees it differently. And so, and by the way, you know, I don't really see myself as a leader. I'm doing what I do, right? I'm just a voice. I'm being guided. You know, I think I'm a vessel for truth. I'm really passionate about trying to answer my own questions. And when you come from television, you sort of think, you know, I remember early on, you know, one of my first jobs on on actually the Dr. Phil show, I was getting screamed at. You actually get screamed at. It's still legal to be yelled at. Wow, and sort of suffer verbal abuse in television. I think other places they're moving away from it. But I was like sitting down at my desk, and the executive producer just torn one of my first edits apart. You're an idiot. Why was this cut this way? You got to do this. I didn't know what she wanted. And I remember sitting there thinking, you know, I'm never going to be able to figure out what my boss really, how she would make this piece. I was trying to think, does she want me to do this? She want me to do this? And I just thought, you know, Del, either the way you ask questions and things that interest you are the things that interest enough people to make your segment successful, or you're in the wrong job. You know, you're in the wrong job. And so it really was, it sort of forced me into, you know, luckily I grew up with meditation, but I just sat down and got quiet. And I said, you know, the piece isn't, you don't know what she wants, but the piece wasn't right. If there's something wrong with it, how would you make it something you would want to see that would ask the right questions? And that's sort of how I approached it. And the executive producer came in moments later, well, hours later probably, and said, there you go, you got it. And, you know, I remember as I went on for years after that, watching different producers and directors crying at their desks, say, what's going on? They're like, I can't figure out what they want from me. And I said, what do you want? You know, and I said, I gave everyone the same speech. Either you ask questions that people really care about, and look, there are people there. I remember I've been in music, I've been around arts. There are people that write poetry, but it just doesn't resound with enough people to make money or be in television or like those. That's just your fate, right? I think luckily for me, you know, I've sort of experienced that if I'm questioning it, millions of other people are questioning it too. And I think that's something that people need to recognize as they sit and watch this, to say, what can I do? Number one, what you have to understand is you're not alone. You know, you're not the only one asking that question. And there's media trying to tell you, you are alone. No one else is sharing this. This virus is killing everybody. And if you don't think that, then you're by yourself, you know, you're alone and together, or whatever these crazy statements are, these sort of, these mind-numbing mantras coming from our televisions. But sort of like I approach TV, what you have to recognize, if you're asking that question, it's coming from a real place, and millions of other people are asking that question too. So for people watching for the first time, they're like, well, you know, I'm about to have kids, or I'm questioning vaccines. Good. That question is natural. That is your natural instincts, and really your greater mind saying, you know, for some reason, injecting my brand new perfect baby with viruses and bacteria and DNA from aborted babies and DNA from worms and primates and cocker spaniels and putting in toxic metals like aluminum and mercury and formaldehyde that I see getting, toys get recalled and formaldehyde, but I see it in the vaccine. It just doesn't sound like a smart thing to do. You know, trust that instinct is all I can say. Trust that instinct and come from your place of questioning and stay there and get answers. I remember I was asked, you know, by a reporter attacking me last year at the Washington, D.C. event. She said, you know, well, you're telling people, that, you know, that they should investigate, they should question vaccines. Like, yes. It's like, well, what if they don't get their answers? And I say, then they should keep researching. You shouldn't do anything that you haven't found answers that make sense to you on, period. And that's all I can say. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. What I try to do at the Highwire is show you, you know, how we research things. And Highwire is a really unique experience because whereas in television, you do all of your investigation ahead of time, you sit privately and do your interviews, you already pre-interviewed everyone on the phone, so you knew what they were going to say. Then you asked the questions to really get what you wanted, and then you show the public the point that you wanted to make. We are, you know, sort of dissecting that process and being much more transparent on the Highwire. You know, those of us that came from television are doing something we were all told you never do. It's a live show. It's a live event, and many of the times I'm asking questions from somebody I've never met before and never spoke with before, because what I'm trying to show people is the questions I would be giving. And by the way, the doctors and Dr. Phil and all those experiences, my questions were always cut out. You never heard what the question was. You only heard the statements being made. I'm trying to show people what the questions should sound like, because that's where truth comes from. Ask the right question and you get the right answer. And I think that that's, when we talk about censorship and all these things, that's dangerous, right? That's dangerous to establish thought that, as you pointed out, we studied in journalism school that, you know, you have to be, you know, objective. You shouldn't be subjective. You shouldn't be choosing and deciding what you're going to say ahead of time or what you want this story to mean. Documentarians shouldn't set out to make a point. They should allow people to express their thoughts. You know, one of the things that was, you know, that I've been attacked for in Vaxxed, interestingly enough, when people were censoring, I was like, why is it being censored? Why are you kicking out of your theater? Or, you know, why are you writing this bad article? It's like, well, there's inconsistencies. I said, what do you mean there's inconsistencies? And one of the things they pointed out was, well, you have two different scientists. One is saying that the autism rate in the 1970s was 1 in 5,000. And then another scientist is saying it was 1 in 10,000. And so, and I was like, wait, hold on a second. You're saying my film isn't accurate because two different scientists are saying different things? That should prove that my film had no agenda, and that scientists look at different data points and get their information from different places. And I clearly did not go out of my way to make these people all say the same homogenized thing to make my point. So your argument that the inconsistencies should prove to you that this is a true documentary where I'm allowing scientists and doctors to speak their mind. That's what I do on the Highwire. I'm not here to prove some point. In fact, you know, I'm going to have Zach Bush on my show this week, who's one of the greatest medical scientific minds, one of the greatest speakers, you've ever met. And I know he hasn't been watching my show. I'm not aware. I'm too busy to know exactly what he's done. But luckily, I have a relationship where I say, Zach, let's sit down. I want to ask you what you think is going on, sort of like what you're doing here. And I think that is the future of media, right? That is where we're gaining through this whole COVID-19 experience. Our viewership in the last 8 weeks is 25 times bigger than it was
Wonderful.
8 weeks ago, because people are tired of the repetitive Montrum-style headline repeating, so-called news. You're just left empty with no feeling that you understand the topic, just that you're afraid of your lack of knowledge. More and more people are gravitating into shows like the Highwire, where you're going, wow, that's the question I wanted to ask. And oh my God, I get to hear someone that actually has worked in a laboratory, has worked, in Wuhan, China, answering these questions. That's what we're providing. And of course they have to censor that, right? I mean, when you look at these things, and one of the things I really want to get across, especially with your audience, because I know this is where you come from. We also approach this from a spiritual space. I have no fear right now. I have no fear of COVID-19. I also am not afraid of these draconian measures and the language that Bill Gates and Tony Fauci and the WHO are saying. We want to be able to come to your house and, take away anybody that's testing positive. We're tracking your cell phones. We're going to microchip you. We're going to force vaccinate you.
We're going to put RNA. We're going to put genetic coding.
We're going to put RNA. We're going to interrupt your experience with God and the information as it's passing. We're going to put synthetic messages into your body to make your cells mutate themselves. Look, if that's our future, then we just simply didn't wake up. But if we are awake, we can't fear. It's like me, you can't force me back to sleep. And what I'm seeing is more and more people waking up, especially because of these events, right? This is what it takes to grow. These are the birth pangs right now, coming through that, out of that darkness into the light. This is an amazing time. It's a beautiful time. And to point to the censorship and these scary measures, this is what bullies do, right? This is their nature. They have no other nature. And what is a bully? It's simply a person that lacks the intellectual depth to be able to engage you in a conversation, to answer your questions in a way that you are won over by their thoughts. They have lost humanity with their language. They have lost humanity with their intelligence. Instead, now they're bullying us and forcing us and censoring us. And all of those throughout history, all of those events always happen when a paradigm is dying. You are watching the death of sick thoughts, of a misunderstanding of what illness is, of what viruses are, of what bacteria is, and how we are in concert on this planet, and we are still perfectly designed by God on a perfect earth that we can still fix and evolve through. We are watching the death of stupid thinking, and it has a lot of side effects to it. Don't be distracted. You're watching it die before your eyes. That's all that's happening right now.
Amen. That's great. Yes. Thank you, Del. That is wonderful. Just got to take that in for a second, because it is, I mean, what you're speaking about is, does it go out with a whimper or does it go out with a bang? And how many people will walk lockstep in the direction of what doesn't enliven them and their children? I mean, when you learn that the concept of the COVID-19 vaccine involves, and I mean, Gates News, that when that article came out, oh, I'm so excited, we've got genetic coding. And I thought, so how many people are going to sign up for that? Oh yeah, let me get some genetic coding in my DNA that's going to just be passed on through the ovaries and the sperm of my children. We're going to I'm going to be responsible for mutating my life and my children's life. Okay, rah rah. And so
yeah.
I feel like people are asking questions. And what's really important, I believe, is that We have freedom of choice. We don't have to like each other to stand for freedom. We don't have to believe the same thing necessarily to stand for freedom of choice and freedom of rights. And so what I appreciate so much about everything that you're talking about is you are doing what I think is one of the greatest gifts we can give another human being, and that is engendering critical, original thinking and analysis. If you have one particular point of view, that's all you think. So if you are uncomfortable with just being given, here, think this, do this, wear this, go here, go to the Highwire, continue, go to ICANdecide.org, go to the other organizations that are doing that. And you know, Dale, one of the things I also really appreciate, of the many things I appreciate about you, is that we have agreed since the first time that we ever talked about unity and about unifying. So I want to just acknowledge you, because in all the time that I've known you, I have never heard you badmouth another person. And that to me is the sign of a leader, because when you have a sphere of influence, people are going to try and knock you down. People are going to say things. They're going to talk, you know what, about you. And one of the things that I heard Michael Beckwith say many years ago is that mediocrity attacks excellence. So I'm not judging anyone as mediocre. I'm just saying that when you do the research so that you are informed, right? One of the things that we have all talked about from the very beginning is that when parents bring their kids into the doctor's offices, the doctors themselves are not informed. And they in turn recite whatever the pharmaceutical rep told them, and they don't provide informed information. So informed consent is necessary, because it allows you to educate yourself, which is what you're talking about. Do the research, ask the uncomfortable questions. But Dale, what you're also talking about as this particular paradigm of let's say, sleepwalking, thinking you're awake process, you're asking people to grow up. You're asking people to become grown-ups and be mature, because a mature person may be scared, but they will ask the questions. They will ask those awkward questions. They will do the research. So in this time, with this, you know, the preponderance of news about this COVID-19 and about the lockdown and the opening, what would you suggest that people do in addition to watching Highwire, which I'm saying you have to watch Highwire every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, and go to ICANdecide.org. What steps can people take to A, keep their minds healthy, and B, keep their, like when you talk about politics, right? In the Constitution, freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't necessarily mean the acquisition, but we're in the process of, right? That's our birthright. Freedom is our birthright. How can we support people in recognizing and going, oh, okay, wait, I don't have to do what they're telling me to do?
Yeah. I mean, look, these are all really complex issues right now, because on the one hand, you know, I wasn't against the quarantine. I think there's a potential someday, somewhere, there could be a biological weapons attack. I have less concern that a natural virus, since none has ever wiped out our species, will ever have that level of danger, but it's possible. We certainly need to, you know, as I always try to imagine, right? I mean, I'm a writer. I always, you know, I you know, come from a place where you try and think of what the bad guys and the good guys would think. You got to sort of think, you know, on all sides of it. If you're going to write a good story, you don't just have a really shallow bad guy and a complex good guy. You got to see both sides of it. So I'm able to look at, and I think if I'm a leader of, you know, 330 million Americans, you want to be able to protect them, right? And you need to know that should something happen, how do I get them all to you know, shelter or get out of the way without creating a panic? And essentially we saw that that's possible. And so I guess as a test, we saw that we have passed that test. My concern is that once we now recognize as the data becomes more and more obvious, and by the way, it was obvious, I think 9 weeks ago, maybe 10 weeks ago, when we started crunching the data that was available out of China, then available out of Italy. It was easy to start crunching the numbers and doing your own type of modeling. And so we were predicting the fall of the Imperial College model, 9 or 10 weeks ago. All of that has been obvious. You just had to ask the right questions. But there's a lot of things you just covered that I think are really important. And I think because I'm going to guess your audience tends to be a little more evolved, I'd like to sort of stray away from a safe place into just talking about the illnesses. But how are we going to move through this? Because there are discussions right now, whether you're in the movement or not, people fighting each other, people accusing, each other of things, and as you said, Michael Beckwith said, mediocrity attacks, I forget what it was, the
excellence.
The excellence, and as soon as you said that, I remember once, I was having a conversation with my dad, and I was in film school at the time, and I was just going off on how Steven Spielberg just totally failed us on this film. The character arcs didn't make any sense. I hated the way the cameras were set up, and I was just on this rant, right? I knew everything. And I remember I got done, and my father said, "You know what Steven Spielberg is not doing today or right now as we speak?" I said, "No, what?" "He's not complaining about Del Bigtree." And that always stuck with me, right? It's always, it's easy to go after those people that have had success and really put themselves out there. We can sit there and judge, but they're not aware of what, because it's not a part of their experience. That's really how I see this. I see attacks on me from different sides. Look, I deal with it every day coming from every major news source there is, and I'm doing a lot of interviews right now. And I always start those interviews out the same way. Like, look, I've read your other articles. It's clear where you're coming from. I'm pretty sure you're setting out to do some form of a hit piece on me and the people that speak like me. I'm just really curious. I mean, you're a reporter like I am. We're all passionate about what makes someone tick, like what is their motivation. So the question really should be, what do you think is motivating me? Why do you think I'm going to subject myself to this interview right now? And the truth is that I'm just driven by my questions and what I see as the truth moving forward and what I've discovered and what I'm continuing to ask questions about. And so by that nature, I do it a lot. My face is out there. I expect people should be challenging me, right? I mean, we should be challenging each other. Now, it gets out of control when, you see that word, right? Controlled opposition or these things. Those things may exist. I mean, I ask myself the same thing, right? I mean, we are such a powerful network of awoke people now. And it very well may be that this, relatively manufactured pandemic is a result of how much we were doing and how much we were growing.
Right.
So you would guess someone is being put in the midst of us to track us, try and get us to, lose our way. But what would that person do, right? What would they do? They would make us start attacking each other. The only way you can break a united front is to get them to start going after each other, which is why over the last 4 years, Wendy, almost everybody I have ever stood on a stage with, someone called me and said, that person is controlled opposition. And these are people, and I've heard it from people we all respect. And I've always said the same thing. I've always said, I don't have the time to do the level of investigation that I do on everything I find important to really figure out if that's true about that person. So I have a really simple set of rules. Are they standing up and speaking for people's personal rights to decide what's, what they breathe, what they eat, what's injected into them? If those are their criteria and they're standing on stage, then I'm going to stand with them. Because if I listen to everybody that told me I shouldn't stand with that person because of who they are, of what they've done, then I would be standing on a stage alone. And there is no way that we are going to meet this moment and create this light, blinding experience of evolution that has been spoken about for millennia and I believe is upon us right now. There is no way light can beam from people that are attacking each other for any reason. And so for anyone that speaks like that, I would say you are welcome to your opinion of any one of us that has a voice. But I would caution that, you know, if I am controlled opposition or Bobby Kennedy is, or anyone like that, our goal would be to get you all to fight each other. That has never been. If you look at, I have 160 something episodes of the Highwire of Vaxxed, and as you've said, all I've ever attempted to do is try and get us united. And I'm running out of time because I have to run to another interview. So I want to talk about, I want to talk about this idea of being united for a moment, because I think we have a misconception of what that means. I think we think it means we all agree, that we all agree and we, you know, see the world the same way. That is a dangerous world. A dangerous world is one in which there's no diversity, where there's only one single thought, that groupthink walks in lockstep. That is what creates a Nazi Germany. That is what creates a communist China or a North Korea. That is not our goal. Our goal is actually, I think, to find as little in common as we can that burns so bright that we can hold on to it while holding on to the diversity of what we are. This virus, and in discussions about bacteria and virus, you don't want all of the viruses in your body to do the same thing, because then you're going to be sick. You don't want all your cells to grow. You want some to die. If they only grow, you have cancer, right? You need diversity. We have a diverse biosphere, you know, the microbiome, the biome in our gut, you know, tens of thousands of, you know, if not millions of different bacteria and viruses, good and bad, constantly battling, that makes up our skin, makes up who we are. What's brilliant is so many great doctors like Dr. Erickson in Bakersfield, California, that came forward and is now discussing all of the hand sanitizers, all of the trying to wrap ourselves in a bubble is making us more sick. And when you ask me, you know, what can we not do? We cannot separate. We cannot socially distance. We cannot distance ourselves from our humanity. It's our togetherness, our willingness to hold and hug each other through our our differences, to share our different microbiomes with each other, because it makes us stronger, not weaker. We've really got to get away from this mindset that's being pumped out by what is not journalism any longer, but is a, you know, a mind brainwashing mantra that you must all defer away from your own specialness, your own uniqueness. It is only the group and all of you thinking as one in lockstep that makes us a society. That makes us death. That is cancer. That is illness. We are brilliant because of our differences, and all we should agree is to stand out of each other's way so that we can find ourselves, right? It's true about relationship too. Even as husbands and wives, right? We get, you know, you ever find yourself in a place where all you're doing is seeing the negative in that person? You've been, you know, you got to catch yourself. You got to catch yourself there and say, even if all of those things were true, how are they going to change if I hold them in that image?
Exactly.
You know, we've got to clear that image. I think about, you know, Sting's song, "If you love someone, set them free."
Yeah.
We have to set each other free. And it's going to be a real challenge, as many of us, and it's true about relationships, we go through tragic events with each other. We all get through that at different times. It can be very difficult for each other. One is still going through the rage and anger, where the other person's moving into acceptance. None of us are going to do this in the same time. So many of us are already so easily throwing away our masks. We have a different understanding. We're listening to different scientific bodies, but we're going to have to walk with each other. And as I said in a show 2 weeks ago, you know, what happened to the quarantine should stay in the quarantine. I'm going to need to forgive my neighbors for taking pictures of me for walking my dog when I wasn't supposed to, for not wearing a mask, or for being too close to my children in a park. I'm going to have to forgive you, and you're going to have to forgive me for what you think was me taking off my mask too early. We're going to have to celebrate each other's differences. And I think the only way forward is to really look at historically what brings us here. And no virus has ever wiped out this species. No bacteria has ever wiped us out. And certainly this one, whether it's man-made or natural, it clearly has no ability to truly bring danger upon over 95% of us. And I actually think if we cleared a lot of the manipulation away and really looked honestly at this illness, there's better ways to treat it. We are really killing people right now with our ignorance and our desire to be right. Let go of rightness. As my father, you know, who was a great teacher for me, used to always say, would you rather be right or would you rather have peace?
I like your dad.
That's what we have to think about as we move forward. Our rightness is peace, is setting each other free, is loving each other. And I think if you find yourself in fear, either of the illness or those that are trying to keep you from celebrating your lack of fear about the illness, you're afraid of microchips or you're afraid of the disease, fear is still our enemy. As you know, President Roosevelt said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And I think the greatest mechanism we have right now, we all have to check in, is ask ourselves, am I afraid? What am I afraid of? And I think if you really dig down, you'll recognize that it's your lack of understanding. You have an ignorance about something. So don't sit there in fear. Get out and start asking the questions to get to answers that help you move through that fear, because that is our only issue right now. And by the way, you are perfectly capable. You don't need to have a doctorate. You don't need to be a scientist to understand what's happening in this world right now. You don't need to be a mathematician. I would argue that a third grade math ability and reading ability can bring you to the promised land right now. And I know everyone watching this has that.
Perfect. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you, Wendy.
So everybody, that is Dale Bigtree, and you can see him live every Thursday on the Highwire with Dale Bigtree, 11 a.m. Pacific time. You can check your local listings. Please go to icandecide.org and donate and support. And you can go to Million Mamas, M-A-M-A-S, millionmamasmovement.org, and sign up so we can keep you apprised of wonderful happenings and interviews such as Dell. We're going to be doing the Healthy People 2020 online summit that is coming up. And above all, just as Dell said, stay in your heart, one foot in front of the other, be open. Would you rather be right or would you rather have peace? So be well, stay well, and know that you are healthy and you are strong. And together we rise. So thank you for your time, Dell. And big hugs to you and the family. And I look forward to speaking with you soon. And thank you to your incredible team and for all the work that you do. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Good seeing
bye.
You. See you soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye.